Log entry hash 2187. Commander Vex Brightscale, Head Combat Instructor at the Galactic Military Academy. You know what's funny about being a combat instructor for 3 decades? Just when you think you've seen everything, the universe throws something new at you that makes your scales ripple with disbelief. Take today, for instance. I remember standing on the crystalline observation deck of the Academy's primary training hall, my iridescent scales reflecting the golden light of our binary stars. Below me, a new batch of cadets were attempting, and largely failing, at basic gravitational adaptation exercises. Most species in the Galactic Alliance have evolved in similar gravity conditions, around 0.7 to 0.8 Earth standard, but then there was her, Sarah Chen, the human, the Deathworlder. "Cadet Chen," I called out, my translator struggling to match my clicking mandibles to human speech patterns. "Perhaps you'd care to demonstrate proper form for your classmates." She turned to face me, and I couldn't help but notice how the other cadets instinctively shifted away. Can't blame them, really. Humans are, well, they're terrifying when you really think about it. While most sentient species evolved to be specialized and efficient, humans kept all their primitive survival traits. The redundant organs, the ability to heal from grievous wounds, the sheer endurance that lets them chase prey until it collapses from exhaustion. And Sarah, she was exceptional even by human standards. "Yes, Commander Brightscale," she responded, snapping to attention with that characteristic human enthusiasm that always made me wonder if they were planning to attack or just really excited. In their case, probably both. I watched as she approached the gravity chamber. The other cadets, a mix of Centaurians with their flowing tentacles, crystalline Proxians, and even a few silicon-based Rigelians, whispered among themselves. The chamber was set to 3G, enough to make most species collapse. Sarah stepped in, and you know what the most unsettling part was? She smiled, actually smiled, showing those bone-white teeth that evolution had shaped into omnivorous weapons. The gravity increased, and while her movement slowed slightly, she remained standing. More than standing, she began the combat forms with a grace that shouldn't have been possible. "This," I announced to the class, trying to keep my own amazement out of my voice, "is what proper adaptation looks like. Notice how Cadet Chen maintains her center of gravity, how she—" I trailed off as Sarah launched into a series of moves that weren't part of the basic forms, kicks that would shatter most species' load-bearing appendages, strikes that seemed to ignore the crushing gravity. The other cadets' bioluminescence dimmed in collective awe and terror. That's the thing about humans that most people don't understand. It's not just their physical capabilities that make them Deathworlders. It's their drive to push beyond what's possible, to take whatever limitations you put on them as a personal challenge. I clicked my mandibles thoughtfully. If I'd known then what Sarah Chen would eventually become, would I have done anything differently? Probably not. Some storms you can't prevent. You can only watch them gather and hope you're ready when they break. But that's getting ahead of the story, isn't it? Log entry hash 2188. Commander Vex Brightscale. Incident report. Training mission to ruins of Nexus 7. Standard training mission, they said. Perfectly safe, they said. Next time the Academy Board suggests sending cadets to an ancient ruins planet during plasma storm season, I'm going to suggest they take a nice long vacation in a black hole. The mission started normally enough. 3 training squads, 12 cadets total, with me supervising. The ruins of Nexus 7 are usually perfect for teaching xenoarchaeology and basic survival skills. Keyword, usually. "Commander," Cadet Lux of the Proxians called out, their crystalline form vibrating with alarm. "The atmospheric sensors are showing unusual readings." Before I could respond, the sky turned green. Not the pleasant green of a garden world, but the sickly green of an angry plasma storm. Lightning that could melt durasteel began arcing between the ancient spires around us. "Emergency protocols," I broadcasted on all frequencies. "Form up and head for the shelter zones." That's when everything went sideways. Literally in Sarah Chen's case, as she dove to push Cadet Zora out of the way of a falling column. The ground beneath her crumbled, sending her tumbling into what looked like an ancient ventilation shaft. "Chen!" I rushed to the edge, my scales bristling with alarm. Through the dust and chaos, I could barely make out her form 20 meters below. "I'm okay," her voice crackled through the comm. "But, Commander, there's something down here. Something weird." "Maintain position. We'll send down rescue equipment once the storm passes." "No, you don't understand." There was something different in her voice, something that made my primary heart skip a beat. "I can feel it, like a humming in my bones." That's another thing about humans. While most species evolved sophisticated sensory organs, humans retained what they call gut feelings, primitive survival instincts that sometimes border on precognition. We'd learned to take those instincts seriously. "The storm's getting worse," Cadet Lux warned. "We need to move now." I made a decision I would later question 1,000 times. "Chen, mark your position. Once the storm passes—" "Commander," she interrupted, her voice filled with that terrible human curiosity that had probably given her ancestors the bright idea to poke sleeping predators with sticks. "The humming. It's getting stronger. There's a passage here. I think something's calling me." "Chen, that's impossible. The ruins have been dead for millennia." "Then why are the walls starting to glow?" Through the comm, I heard her footsteps echoing as she moved deeper into the ruins. The rational part of my mind screamed to order her back. The part that had spent years studying humans knew it would be pointless. "These markings," her voice came through, now tinged with awe. "They're responding to my presence. The whole corridor is lighting up as I— Oh. Chen, report?" "Commander," she whispered, "I think I just found out why this place was abandoned, and why no one was ever supposed to find it again." A new sound came through the comm. A sound that made every survival instinct in my body fire at once. It was like the hum of a reactor core mixed with the growl of a predator, overlaid with harmonics that shouldn't have been possible in normal space. "It's beautiful," Sarah breathed. "Chen, whatever you're looking at, don't touch it. That's an order." She laughed. Not the nervous laugh of someone about to disobey orders, but the genuine laugh of someone who just got a fantastic joke. "Too late, Commander. It already touched me." The comm erupted in static, and for a moment the entire ruins seemed to pulse with energy. When the static cleared, Sarah's voice came through again, but different, like there were subsonic harmonics underneath her words. "Commander, I think you're going to want to see this, and you might want to update the Academy's files on extinct civilizations, because whoever built this place, they weren't extinct. They were waiting for someone like me." I felt my scales flatten against my body in instinctive terror, because in all my years of teaching Deathworlders, I'd learned one crucial thing. The only thing more dangerous than a human is a human who just found a new toy. Log entry hash 2189, Commander Vex Brightscale. Classified documentation of Nexus 7 discovery. Once the plasma storm subsided, we rappelled down to Sarah's position. I'd seen a lot of strange things in my career, but nothing prepared me for what we found. The chamber was massive, carved from something that looked like black glass but felt like liquid under our scanning equipment. And there, in the centre, stood Sarah Chen, surrounded by what I can only describe as living light. "Don't freak out, Commander," she said, as if she wasn't covered in swirling bands of energy that should have fried her nervous system. "It's perfectly safe, for me at least." Cadet Lux stepped forward, their crystalline form reflecting the strange light. "Fascinating. The energy patterns suggest a quantum level—" "Stop!" Sarah's shout froze everyone in place. "Don't come closer, it doesn't like you." The swirling energy around her pulsed red for a moment, and I swear I heard something growl. Not with my ears, but with something more primitive. Something that made me want to run and hide in a very small, very secure hole. "The system," Sarah explained, "it's picky about who it talks to. Says most species are too specialized, too evolved." She laughed. "Apparently, being a primitive apex predator with blunt teeth and no natural weapons makes me perfect." "That's impossible," Professor Naktul declared, his tentacles waving in agitation as he consulted his instruments. "The energy readings suggest a Class 12 weapons platform. The biological interface alone would overwhelm a primitive nervous system. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Primitive? Professor, when was the last time you tried to digest lactose? Because my primitive nervous system can handle dairy products, spicy food, and apparently ancient alien weapons designed to fight gods. The professor's tentacles drooped. Point taken. I moved closer, careful to stay outside the energy field. Chen, what exactly is this thing? It's called the Nexus Heart. From what it's telling me, the ancients built it as a last resort against something they called the Void Hunters. But none of them could use it. They were too perfect, too specialized. She flexed her hand, and the energy responded, forming complex geometric patterns that hurt to look at. Humans, though, we're messy, redundant. We've got neurons in our guts, for crying out loud. We're basically walking backup systems with anxiety. The records, Professor Nuktul interjected, indicate dozens of species tried to activate the weapon, all failed. The neural feedback killed them instantly. Sarah nodded. Yeah, it told me about that. But here's the thing about human brains. We're really good at adapting to trauma. Neuroplasticity, they called it back on Earth. Our brains literally rewire themselves when damaged. She closed her eyes, and the energy field expanded, forming what looked like armor around her body. The system isn't just connecting to my nervous system, it's learning from it, evolving, just like we did back on Earth. I watched in fascination as the energy shifted colors responding to her thoughts. And it recognizes you as, what exactly? An apex predator. Her grin was pure predator, all teeth and no humor. Turns out all those things that made humans terrible spaceship pilots, our constant need for motion, our inability to stay still, our tendency to poke dangerous things with sticks, make us perfect for this. We're not just compatible with the system, we're what it was waiting for. Professor Naktul's instrument sparked and died. The quantum entanglement patterns are unprecedented. The weapon isn't just interfacing with her nervous system, it's becoming part of me, Sarah finished. Or maybe I'm becoming part of it. Hard to tell the difference anymore. That's when the emergency alerts started blaring. The ones warning us about the pirate fleet that had just dropped out of hyperspace above Nexus 7. Sarah's expression changed, and for a moment I saw something ancient and terrible in her eyes. The energy around her pulsed with anticipation. "Commander," she said, her voice overlaid with harmonics that made my scales itch, "I think it's time for a practical demonstration." And that's when I realized we hadn't just found a lost weapon. We'd given it exactly what it had been waiting for, a species crazy enough, tough enough, and just primitive enough to use it properly. The galaxy was about to learn why you don't give Deathworlders ancient superweapons. Log entry #2190. Commander, Vex Brightscale. Combat Incident Report. The thing about space pirates is that they're usually smart enough to avoid attacking military installations. Usually. But Captain Dren Blackspine and his fleet had apparently missed that memo. Or maybe they thought an academy training facility would be an easy target. Poor bastards. 12 warships, Lieutenant Zara announced, her bioluminescent patches flashing with panic. 3 heavy cruisers, 7 destroyers, 2 assault carriers. They're launching boarding pods. The Academy's emergency sirens wailed as cadets and staff rushed to evacuation points. Through the transparent dome of the command center, I could see the pirate fleet's weapons charging, their hulls gleaming like hungry predators in the binary starlight. "Nearest response fleet is 3 hours out," Captain Nex reported, his chitinous hands flying over the control panels. "Planetary shields at 60% and dropping. We need to evacuate now." That's when Sarah Chen walked into the command center, or maybe floated. It was hard to tell with the way the Nexus Heart's energy swirled around her, distorting space itself. The security systems didn't even try to stop her. Smart machines. "Commander," she said, her voice carrying those strange harmonics that made everyone's threat recognition systems go haywire. "Permission to engage the enemy." Captain Nex chittered in disbelief. Cadet, this isn't a training exercise. Those are actual warships with actual... I know exactly what they are. Sarah's smile was pure predator. The heart knows too. It remembers the last time pirates tried to raid this sector, 20,000 years ago. Chen, I said carefully, even with the weapon, you're talking about going up against an entire fleet. She turned to me, and I saw that her eyes were glowing with the same energy that surrounded her. You know what's funny, Commander? Humans have this old saying, go big or go home. The energy pulsed, forming what looked like wings of pure light. And I really don't feel like going home right now. Before anyone could stop her, she walked to the main viewport. The energy around her intensified, and suddenly her voice was in all our heads, carried not by comm systems, but by something far older and more terrible. Hey, pirates! Her broadcast cut across every frequency, probably echoing in the heads of every pirate in the fleet. I'm going to give you one chance to leave, not because I'm feeling merciful, but because humans apparently have to offer a warning before we unleash ancient superweapons. Some nonsense about fair play. Through the command center's sensors, I watched the pirate fleet's response. They launched everything: missiles, plasma torpedoes, kinetic rounds, enough firepower to crack a small moon. Sarah laughed. The sound made my scales ripple. Wrong answer! The Nexus Heart's energy exploded outward, enveloping her in what looked like armor made of light and shadow. She lifted off the ground, the Academy's artificial gravity having about as much effect on her as a gentle breeze. Commander, she said, turning to me one last time, you might want to record this. Pretty sure it's going to rewrite a few textbooks. Then she did something that made every evolutionary survival instinct in my body scream. She opened an airlock, with her inside it. Chen! I shouted. What are you... Relax, Commander. Her voice came through clear despite the vacuum of space. Turns out the heart doesn't just interface with nervous systems, it can keep a human alive in space. Who knew? We watched in stunned silence as she flew toward the pirate fleet. Actually flew like some ancient god of war, trailing streamers of energy that hurt to look at directly. This is impossible, Professor Naktul whispered, his tentacles curled in shock. The power requirements alone... Sir, Lieutenant Zara interrupted, the pirates are launching fighters. Hundreds of small craft poured from the carriers like angry insects. Sarah's voice came through again, but different now, layered with something ancient and hungry. You know what else is funny? She sounded almost giddy. Humans used to dream about flying through space without ships. Used to write stories about it, make movies. Like somewhere deep in our DNA, we knew this was possible, we just needed the right tool. The first wave of fighters reached her, their weapons fired, and passed right through her as the Nexus Heart's energy shifted, turning her partly out of phase with normal space. Now, she said, let me show you why the ancients built this thing, and why they made sure only a species crazy enough to fight gods could use it. The energy around her surged, forming patterns that made my eyes water. Mathematical equations that shouldn't have been possible, geometries that existed in more dimensions than our universe had any right to contain. And then the real fight began. I've seen a lot of battles in my time, seen weapons that could crack planets, ships that could outrace light, but I'd never seen anything like this. Sarah Chen, rookie cadet, primitive Deathworlder, danced through space like she was born to it. The Nexus Heart's power flowed through her and around her, turning fighters into clouds of rapidly cooling plasma, catching missiles and sending them back at their launchers. Commander, Captain Nex said quietly, I think we just changed the balance of power in the galaxy. I watched as Sarah prepared to engage the main fleet, the Nexus Heart's energy building, to levels that made our sensors short out. No, Captain, I replied. We just gave a human the ability to fly through space and punch ships. The galaxy isn't just going to change, it's going to have a collective panic attack. And honestly, I couldn't blame it one bit. Log entry hash 2191, Commander Vex Brightscale. Battle analysis. Have you ever watched a supernova up close? Not through sensors or shields, but with your own eyes. That's what watching Sarah Chen fight was like. Beautiful, terrifying, and absolutely impossible to look away from. By the void. What is she doing now? Captain Nex whispered as we tracked her approach to the first heavy cruiser. The Nexus Heart's energy had transformed around her, forming what looked like a massive humanoid shape, with Sarah at its center. An ancient memory stirred in my genetic code, something about giants who walked among stars. "Black spine to all ships!" The pirate captain's panicked transmission cut across all frequencies. "Concentrate fire on that thing!" The cruiser's main guns opened up, filling space with enough plasma fire to vaporize a small moon. Sarah's response. She caught it. Actually caught the plasma in her energy-constructed hands, compressed it, and hurled it back like a human child throwing a snowball. The cruiser's shields shattered like glass. Fun fact about humans. Sarah's voice echoed through every comm system, still somehow maintaining that conversational tone that made it even more terrifying. We evolved throwing things, rocks, spears, plasma bolts. Makes no difference to our brains. The pirate fleet scattered, finally realizing what they were dealing with. Too late. The Nexus Heart's energy shifted again, forming what looked like wings made of mathematical formulas and impossible angles. Sarah shot forward faster than our sensors could track, her human laugh mixing with harmonics that made reality itself shudder. "Fascinating," Professor Naktul exclaimed, his scientific curiosity apparently overriding his survival instincts. "The weapon isn't just enhancing her natural abilities, it's using her instincts as a template, the way she moves, the way she fights." "Like a predator playing with its food," I finished, watching as she literally punched through a destroyer's hull. The pirates were in full retreat now, but Sarah wasn't done. The Nexus Heart's energy spread out in tendrils of light, grabbing ships like a Terran octopus grabbing prey. Even as I watched, she pulled 2 destroyers together, smashing them like a human child playing with toys. "Commander!" Lieutenant Zara called out. "We're picking up transmissions from the pirate fleet. They're begging for mercy." Through the viewport I watched as Sarah paused, hovering in space amid the wreckage of half the pirate fleet. The energy giant she'd created tilted its head, considering. You know what really gets me? Her voice carried that strange dual tone, human amusement layered over something ancient and terrible. "You attacked an academy, full of students, kids, basically. Were you expecting that to be easy?" A destroyer tried to make a break for hyperspace. Sarah gestured almost casually, and space itself seemed to ripple. The ship's hyperspace drive imploded. "Because here's another fun fact about humans," she continued, stalking through space toward Blackspine's flagship. "We get really, really upset when someone threatens our young, even if they're not our species." The flagship's engines flared as they tried to run. Sarah's energy construct reached out and grabbed it by what passed for its throat. "The Nexus Heart is telling me interesting things about you, Captain Blackspine, about all the raids you've led, all the lives you've taken." The energy giant pulled the ship closer. "Want to know what else is interesting about humans? We invented the concept of justice." What happened next? Well, let's just say I'm glad the Academy's sensors couldn't fully process it. The flagship didn't so much explode as get turned inside out through dimensions that shouldn't exist. The remaining pirates surrendered immediately. Smart move, really. First intelligent thing they'd done all day. Sarah floated back to the Academy, the Nexus Heart's energy now a gentle swirl around her rather than the system-spanning titan it had been. She looked satisfied, like a predator after a good hunt. "Chen," I said as she landed in the command center, "what you just did broke about 50 regulations and probably a few laws of physics." She grinned, the Nexus Heart's energy rippling with her amusement. "Yeah, probably. But you know what's really funny? What's that? The heart says this was just a basic test run, a calibration exercise. She looked at her hands where equations and star maps danced across her skin. We weren't even trying hard. The command center fell silent as everyone processed that statement. A cadet, using an ancient superweapon she'd found literally hours ago, had just demolished a pirate fleet, without trying hard. "Commander," Professor Nactal said quietly, his tentacles curled in thought, "I believe we may need to update the threat assessment rankings for humans." Sarah laughed, and the Nexus heart laughed with her, a sound like bells and breaking stars. "Oh, Professor, humans were never the real threat." She gestured to herself, to the energy that had become part of her. The threat was giving us tools that matched our imagination. Looking at her then, seeing how naturally she wore the power of a civilization that had fought gods, I understood something fundamental about humans. They weren't just Deathworlders. They weren't just predators. They were the species that looked at the impossible and thought, "I bet I could do that." And now we'd given them proof that they could. Final log entry #2192. Commander Vex Brightscale. Incident analysis. News travels fast in the Galactic Alliance, but rumors travel faster. Within days of what became known as the Battle of Binary Dawn, every species in known space had heard about the human cadet who fought a pirate fleet bare-handed. Well, bare-handed if you count wearing an ancient superweapon as bare-handed. The Academy's once quiet halls now buzz with whispered conversations and nervous glances. Not at Sarah Chen specifically, but at all human cadets, because everyone's wondering the same thing. How many more ancient weapons are out there, just waiting for a Deathworlder crazy enough to use them? "The Galactic Council wants to speak with you," I told Sarah during her final evaluation. The Nexus Heart's energy swirled lazily around her, like a content predator. "Let me guess. They want to know if there are more artifacts like this?" She gestured to the dancing lights around her. "If other humans could use them." "Can they?" Her smile was pure human mischief. "The heart says there are thousands of similar weapons scattered across the galaxy, all waiting for species primitive enough, adaptable enough, and just crazy enough to use them." She paused. "So yeah, pretty much any human could do this, if they found the right weapon." The implications made my scales tingle. Humans, already terrifying in their natural state, now potentially armed with the weapons of a civilization that fought gods. Sarah was promoted, of course. Hard not to promote someone who single-handedly changed the balance of power in the galaxy. The pirates have gone suspiciously quiet since the battle. Amazing how the prospect of running into a human with a superweapon can affect criminal behavior. But here's the really interesting part. When the Council asked Sarah why the Nexus Heart chose humans, her answer was pure Deathworlder logic. "Because we're not special," she said. "We're not the most evolved, the most specialized, or the most advanced. We're just the species too stubborn to stop climbing out of the gravity well, too curious to stop poking dangerous things, too primitive to know when something's impossible." She grinned that predator grin that all humans seem to have. The ancients built weapons to fight gods, but they made them so only mortals could use them. And nobody's more mortal, more limited, or more determined to break those limits than humans. Looking back now, I realize we were asking the wrong questions all along. We shouldn't have wondered why the ancient weapons chose humans. We should have wondered why humans were still somehow primitive enough, after all their advancement, to be chosen. And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying thing about Deathworlders. They never really left their deadly world behind. They just got better at carrying it with them. End log. Addendum. Sarah Chen graduated top of her class. She now serves as the Alliance's first human artifact specialist. And yes, that job title terrifies everyone as much as you think it does.